Welcome to Cinema Gulp today. This is John.
And this is Ben.
And today we're going to do a quick shot review of Don't Breathe.
Rumor is this guy is sitting on at least $300K. Boom! That's our guy.
Wait, is he blind?
We messed up to rob a blind guy, isn't it?
Just because he's blind don't mean he's insane, bro.
Guys, money's probably in there.
Who's there?
Stay right there.
There are scary movies that provide the occasional jump scare, maybe a bit of TNA, most likely some gratuitous gore, and standard shallow characters. Then there's horror films that try to stretch things beyond the cliched standard and actually try to do something different. These are the ones that make your skin crawl, make your back sweat, and more than anything, stick with you after you've left the theater. Don't Breathe falls much more to the latter. John, what'd you think of Don't Breathe?
I really like Don't Breathe. Watching this film was a very tense experience. That's something that a lot of horror movies, especially the ones that are like PG-13 these days, just have no real tension in them. This film is super intense right from the get-go. It keeps the simple story. It only has a few characters that you're following through this film. It doesn't have a ton of subplots or really any at all. And that's what I really liked, was the execution of how simple they kept this story, and that allowed it to remain this trapped in a box kind of tension-filled movie. I really enjoyed it. It was exciting and frightening at times, and it has some moments that will shock you and you will remember.
Yeah, I think Fede Alvarez is shaping up to be one of those new horror film directors that has a lot to give the genre. Like, he's done two completely different horror films now in every sense of the way. And you said simple. This movie is stripped down, all terror, intensity to the 10th degree. I love the setting of Detroit 8 Mile. It just gives that whole new kind of threat and dread to it. It's all these abandoned homes and like just the awful slummy area of Detroit. And then you have a simple plot with just three sort of main characters as the robbers, and then you have your Stephen Lang, who just tears it up in this movie and is so much fun to watch, and you can tell he's having a blast.
Yeah, he was awesome to watch in this. We don't see him enough in films these days. The rest of the cast was fine too. There's at least one character in the film that stands out as kind of the character no one's gonna like from the moment they meet him. But the rest of the characters the acting was good in the film, I thought. It was very believable, these situations that they were put in. I do think there's some leaps of logic that the characters make, but that's standard with horror movies. They're sometimes going the wrong direction when you know they should be going the other direction or whatever. But it was pretty forgivable in this film. I still think that they were doing what they could to solve this situation. Other things in this film that really stood out was the sound design. It was excellent.
Amazing.
Amazing. It was very creepy right from the get-go. So the use of the sound design is important because your main antagonist / protagonist, it's actually kind of strange. This film, you don't really know who you're rooting against the whole time. There's reasons to find sympathy for the antagonist in this film. But basically, he is a blind man holed up in his house here in 8 Mile, secluded from anybody else. And so that's why the sound design is so important, because it really is like this cat and mouse game of these people trying to escape or hide from this guy. And he's got essentially super hearing because, that's the only sense that he utilizes to live his life. And so the sound design is very important in this film and works perfectly.
It really does. The fact that, we all know the main plot of the story is that they break into this blind man's house. He's a war vet. But this movie has 3 editors. Why, I'm not really sure. I thought the editing was fantastic, especially creating that and creating all those tense moments. But that stood out for me the most. Was definitely the sound. It was shot wonderfully, and again, it was shot with that claustrophobic, really scary tension. From how people took steps to, again, it's called Don't Breathe, so you hear a lot of like heavy breathing, and you hear a lot of people having to hold their breath. But every sound in this, it was really reliant on that, and that could either make or break a horror movie, and it just helped this one significantly. And again, Stephen Lang, unsung hero of the past few decades, always plays a great villain, always plays different, interesting characters. His face is freaking terrifying in this movie. His mannerisms, they're really very militaristic. His physique, intimidating. That dude is ripped.
Yeah, I don't know how old that guy is, but he is ripped. He looks amazing.
He does. I mean, he was in Avatar as the main villain, and he was pretty ripped in that too. But
I think he looks bigger in this, possibly.
yeah, and this is almost 10 years later.
Yeah, seriously.
But this is a unique horror film because, like you said, you don't really know who the protagonist or the antagonist or who's good or who's bad or who you're supposed to be rooting for. It messes with your head a bunch of times through imagery and through giving you ideas of what might be happening. That is the coolest thing about it. At least, at certain points it kind of, I don't want to say derails, but it definitely takes turns and then things become clear later on in the film. But for the most part, you're putting yourself in that position more so than being worried about these people that have invaded this house, because you don't really care about them that much.
Yeah, that's how I felt while watching the film. I did not really care about the characters too much. I thought they did a good job establishing these characters and showing their motivations simply, which was fine. It's all we needed to go on for this film. But it did seem like you kind of wanted to root for Stephen Lang's character, and then they set up some things where maybe you won't root for him. I'm just going to say I agreed with you 100% about putting myself in the situation, not caring so much about these people who are in the situation, although you're along the ride with them, but it's more about feeling like you're trapped in the situation. What would you do? And occasionally they do things that you would do, and so that it helps you to kind of feel like you're in this with them, and then occasionally maybe they go the wrong direction and you're like, really? Stupid idiot, you should have done this. But
yeah, and it was kind of a ballsy decision to kind of have your lead characters not really care about doing the right thing. Like, there's points in the movie where they make decisions that are questionable. Not in the sense that they made a wrong turn when they should have gone this way, but instances in the film where it's showing you even further that the people that you're watching, the people that you're following through this house, they're not really decent people anyway. Definitely a violent and brutal film, but not in the way you would expect it. Without giving anything away, I think that Fede Alvarez has really changed he's kept his style and the intensity, but he's definitely dropped a lot of the just over the top stuff that he's used before. This one is minimalistic in that sense. It fuels itself on tension, suspense, and some dark dread and like helplessness.
Well, and I feel like he's using the elements that he needs best for the film the story he's telling. In the last film that this guy made, Evil Dead, he used a lot of gore, a lot of over-the-top violence, a lot of just disgusting moments, but that's what that film called for. That's what it's playing on what the original did, but just in a bit more serious and gory well, maybe not more gory, but a bit more serious tone to what the original was, but still keeping that element that everyone wanted to see, which was over-the-top violence and gore.
Right.
I expected in this film, and there were moments where I thought, here it comes. This is going to be that moment, because this director's not going to shy away from it. But he did. He went in a completely different direction. It was just more of a claustrophobic, tension-filled film, which was excellent. It was completely different than what we expected him to do. And like you said, I think he's doing great things for the genre, being able to make multiple films that work with the elements that this film particular needs, instead of just throwing in what audiences maybe expect.
Yeah, and this is that one that he made that was, following a remake that he made, which I thought was a standout remake personally. But this one, he got a chance to take a genre, which I guess is a home invasion subgenre, but he got to flip it kind of on its head and turn the tables, where it's not home invaders terrorizing people in the house, it's sort of the opposite, And that's an interesting way to take a film. Yeah,
it did make me think of a number of films. I think that they do their own original stuff with this film, but it fits in with other claustrophobic, tension-type films that we've seen in the past, Green Room being a recent one. It did make me think of that at times, but it stands on its own, I think.
I think it stands on its own, too. I feel the way you did. There's certain scenes in the film that even kind of reminded me of Wes Craven's People Under the Stairs, not in a grand sense, but just in small little things where there's people kind of lost in a house, hiding, running, things like that. Or
there's elements of Panic Room or Cloverfield 10 or whatever that was, 10 Cloverfield Lane, and other films that kind of passed through my mind while watching it, but it never distracted me or made me feel like, oh, this is a ripoff or they're stealing something here. It certainly was its own film and was pretty exciting.
Yeah, and you and I both agree that the scale of the location felt real. No matter where they were, no matter what corridors or rooms that they found, they all kind of fell back into that central location. It was very well shot.
And the time that the film took, it felt real, like this is really happening. Not in real-time events, because it's actually a pretty short hour-and-a-half film, but it still felt like enough time was passing between the moments of the film, and it wasn't being stretched out for some unknown reason.
No, it wasn't. It was all done for the sake of the story. I didn't find anything gratuitous. This movie gets fucking dark. There's some themes later on that really kind of come out of nowhere, and that's pretty much where I'll go with that. But one thing you don't want to expect in this movie is humor, because you won't get it. There's no humor in this movie. Oh! From the opening tracking shot, you just get a sense of dread early on what kind of film this is going to be, and it does not stray from that at all.
Yeah, there were very few laughs, if any at all, but that's not what this film is for. You're right. You hit the nail on the head, though, with that don't expect jokes, don't expect anything funny or humorous. Expect to be on the edge of your seat the whole time.
Yeah, and the film it's not a perfect movie. It takes some liberties when they're relying on a gimmick. I'm not saying this one solely relied on a gimmick, but it did have things where it's like, okay, this is established early on, but then for convenience later, it changes. And all those movies kind of have to fall into that trap. And all these movies kind of eventually get slightly predictable in areas. Though this one, I will admit, I did not know where it was going, and a lot of times I thought I did. It swung a full curveball at me, and I loved that about it. But it did have things that kind of the post-climactic wrap-up of the film was my least favorite thing in it. I was really not loving that aspect. But those are small nitpicks. The movie was awesome.
I agree. I'm right there with you with kind of those being nitpicks for me. Definitely the ending, some of the predictability along the way for me. I definitely had a few eye rolls at times while watching the film, but it never really completely broke the tension. There were moments that kind of swayed the tension a little bit, eased the tension a little bit, but then the film would find a way to kind of slam you right back into it, where you yourself feel like you're stuck in this situation again.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I agree with you that it doesn't always stick to its concept 100%. It sets up certain things, and then for the convenience of the story, plays it out in a different way later in the film, or for convenience of a certain character. Many films, I feel, that set up certain concepts that can't hold on to them through the entire film. It's hard to do that in a realistic way sometimes. They did a pretty good job in this film.
They did. It's a process of writing. It's really difficult to dot all the I's and cross all the T's and that stuff. Things slip through the cracks where, yes, something that was established becomes a convenient segue into something else.
And in almost any film, you have to have somebody who's going to be the survivor, savior, winner at the end. And because of that, usually there's some kind of contrivance to get them to succeed, essentially. Because if everything followed the rules that are set up earlier in the film, they'd never make it out of this situation.
But I'll say this, and this will be the last thing I say. Unlike a lot of films that market themselves as movies that get the audience screaming and the theater erupting, I hadn't been in a movie theater in a while watching a horror film where the audience was reacting so loud. This movie had the audience screaming when they should and freaking out when they should.
Yeah, I could definitely hear the audience squirming in their seat a number of times and feel the tension in the room, which helps, make it palpable for yourself you're surrounded by all these people that are kind of in the same situation. They don't want to breathe during some of the scenes. They're trying to be as quiet as the characters, which was just an interesting thing, but they can't, and they're squirming, and it was a fun experience to watch this film.
What you just said was the best way to sum up this movie. When you're watching it, you are just like the characters. You don't want to breathe because you want to hear exactly what's coming, and that's props to the sound design for that, for sure. Like, you literally don't want to miss things, and you'll miss it by not hearing it, maybe not by seeing it. And that's why the crowd was so quiet when everybody in the movie needed to be quiet. So it worked in that sense. It got the pulse of the theater.
Yeah, this would be a terrible movie to watch in like some area where everyone just loves to talk and at the screen. And you know how you can get that. You go into a cinema and you got all these teenagers or whatever. There were definitely a lot of moments where you felt the pain of the characters, where the impact of the punches, the impact of people being thrown around the room, you could feel it as an audience member. And that's, again, all these moments that help you kind of be in the situation is the way that they handled the violence in the film.
Exactly. That's the best compliment to give it, is that you don't sympathize with any of these characters, but you put yourself in their shoes, and that's what Alvarez wants you to do, and that's where it succeeds the most, I think. For my audience chuggability, I'm going to go ahead and give this movie just a slight top shelf. I think it's better than just giving it the thirst quencher. I think it just tips right into top shelf, where I would recommend it a little bit more than that.
And I'd probably put it towards the top end of the thirst quencher, where definitely think it's worth seeing in the theater. I definitely think it's a fun experience to have with other people in the theater and feel that tension that everyone's feeling. It could work at home as well. You know, turn off the lights and watch this movie at home. It'd be a great experience there as well. This one's worth checking out in the theater, I would say.
And as far as my gulp gauge score, I'm going to give it 7.5 gulps because I think it's extremely well made. You can tell it's got a tight budget. It utilizes it well. The lighting, though, there's not a lot of lights in it. The way they use the lighting is what another thing visually. Yeah, we talked a lot about how great the sound design was, but visually it did do a good job as well. I think it could have done a little bit better as far as some of the lighting stuff go to really put us in the shoes of people walking through this dark house at the same level of what this blind man sees. But for the most part, good performances, really good direction from Alvarez. That guy's awesome. I can't wait to see what he does next. I hope he sticks with this genre and just keeps mixing it up a little bit here and there. But I give it 7.5 gulps.
I would give this a 6.5. I feel like a lot of the same things that you said are reasons why I really liked this film. I think it was very artfully made, which you don't get with a lot of what's supposed to be considered kind of cheap horror films. Films with casts that are unknown. Usually there's not a lot of real attention to the detail in terms of the direction. They just throw a lot of shit on the screen, or they go so flashy that they think they're being something really cool and artsy, but it's not. This one actually felt artfully made, in my opinion. I think that the movie is tension-filled right from the beginning all the way till the very end, which was great. It did its job, and it did its job simply, which was the other thing I really want to point out, is just how concise this story is, and that's what makes it work.
As always, thanks for watching, everybody. This is Ben.
This is John.
For Cinema Gulp, please check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Also, leave us a comment down in the comment section below.
Look for some of our next features we're going to put out, which is going to be Chasers, which are reviews of older films. Ben's going to put out one of his favorite films on his birthday. And then we're also going to do a summer end wrap-up. So thanks again for Cinema Gulp. We drink your cinema.
I drink it up!